A very good evening and welcome to this edition of the Fourth Estate. Charles Mongu Shampagi. This 17th day of March 2019. I've been seeing people sharing a lot about this day from the death of Andrew Felix Kaweesi 2 years ago on March 17th when he was assassinated on 17th March in the morning as he was exiting just after he left his home, and also the 17th March Kanungu mass murder of that group, and of the 10 Commandments of God, restoration of the 10 Commandments of God, Church of Joseph Chiwetere Kataribabo and Keredonia Mwerinde happened. That was 2000.
2000.
Yes, yeah. 2000. But the debate continues around basically three major issues in the week, which is the retreat of the caucus of the National Resistance Movement and passing a resolution in agreement with the Central Executive Committee to keep President Yoweri Museveni and ask him to run again in 2021 as a sole candidate, actually. That's the direction the discussion is taking. And a rumor yet to be verified of a discussion to amend the lower age limit. I have my doubts about that, but we'll find out when the information. It's been coming drip, 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 drip. We don't know what the truth is at the moment. Though I think the statement that the NRM issued today, the commendation of the leader, the revolutionary, is one of the most interesting I've seen in a long period of time. We'll be discussing that, and we will be joined at that moment by somebody from the National Resistance Movement to navigate through that discussion. The story between Uganda and Rwanda, 3 weeks now, this is the third week since the Rwanda government closed the border to commercial traffic at Gatuna border post on the Rwandan side, which is and creating a ghost town of Katuna on the Ugandan side continues, and a lot of exchange, a lot of statements. Uganda continuing to be guarded, but at least we have seen 3 statements being issued by government officials, 2 by Minister of Foreign Affairs Sam Kutesa, 1 by the Minister of Trade Amelia Chambade, and there was another one that was issued earlier. That was a letter actually that leaked by the Uganda Revenue Authority to their counterparts across in Kigali. President Yoweri Museveni has made very calculated and very careful statements so far, though we have seen a lot coming from Rwanda. But some of the individuals that Rwanda has mentioned as being behind the activities of what they call a group bent on destabilizing Kigali have also been speaking out. So Tribert Rujugiro Ayabatwa, a businessman with business interests in Uganda and particularly in Arua town, previously in Rwanda, those were frozen in 2013, and in Burundi, has been speaking. We had spoken to him earlier, but we'll be joined by someone who was a special assistant to President Paul Kagame, David Himbara. He'll be joining us via telephone link up from wherever he is. He'll be joining us shortly. In studio, I have Barbara Among. Barbara is a journalist, largely an independent journalist. She's a trainer and consultant. Very nice to have you, Barbara.
Thank you, Charles, and good evening, viewers.
Making a return to studio after a very short break, disappearance, Kasim Kaira. Kasim Kaira is a veteran journalist. That's how he's being introduced to me here. A veteran journalist, but he is bureau chief for Azam TV in the Great Lakes region. Kasim, it was a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you very much for having me, and good evening, viewers.
We also have Joseph Kabuleta. Joseph Kabuleta is an author. He's a veteran journalist, if you would call him that. Used to be a sports commentator and sports journalist with a very storied career, but you run a blog now at the moment. You run a blog and you work with
the Watchman Ministries.
The Watchman Ministries. Yeah. Yes. Thank you very much. Joseph, very nice to have you.
You're welcome.
Do we have David already online? Okay. This story of Rwanda and Uganda, 3 weeks into the border closure. Now let's start with Barbara. Because we did discuss this matter here. The initial reason was that works on the one-stop border point necessitated the closure of the border. The discussion, 14 days later, today actually is since Thursday last week. It's since this Thursday. Now you're talking about 17 days later. 17 days. No one is talking about the primary reason for closure of the border. Does that surprise you?
I think the primary reason is actually coming out, bits bits by bits. We're actually getting to the real reason now. From the roadworks on the side of the Rwanda. Then we went to Rwanda, raising a number of complaints, and then Uganda giving response. So I think we are actually now getting to the real issue. We are soon. I'm actually very sure that soon either Uganda or Rwanda will actually say what the real reason is, and it's what we all want to say, but again don't want to say, because we know that the real issue is between the two principals, that's President Paul Kagame and President Yoweri Museveni, and we know that they are the only two people who can actually sort out this what's happening. They can explain it, they can sort out what's happening. So I think we need to wait for them.
Okay.
It's developing, and eventually we'll get to the reason.
Kasim, this is the third week of this. I don't know if it's a standoff. I don't know if it's a stalemate. I don't know how to describe what's going on.
It's a confused state of affairs.
Yeah.
But I think by now we definitely know what the reasons are. The only thing that we don't know is why now. Because some of these issues have been going on. Why do we get a spark of coming in with the border closure, which is called the road reconstruction, diversion of traffic?
Not actually a road reconstruction. It's a construction of a one border stop point. Stop post.
There's even the other side of the border, actually the road, which needed to be protected. That was the reason that was given by Rwanda's customs, the Rwanda Revenue Authority. The road now cannot, they cannot allow heavy vehicles to sort of use the road while construction is still going on, which will be going on until the 17th of May, as per plan. But then other reasons now start coming up. So for me, I think probably the reason has been why now? Because the reasons are clear. There were issues about the arrest, according to Rwanda, accusing Uganda of the illegal arrest, detention, torture, and even deportation of Rwandan citizens. That was denied by Uganda. But then within those 14 days, 17 days, as you say now, we get court appearances. One court appearance of Moses Ishimwe, which happened in the Nakawa court, which luckily I was able to be in court and got to speak to the defendant himself, who was granted bail because he was arrested on the 22nd of December and only appeared in court last week. He had been held incommunicado, and the reasons given, of course, it's a case that is active, and therefore we can say little in terms of the circumstances. But the fact that he had been held for more than the 48 hours and then only appearing last week, which is 69 days since he was arrested. So with this one particular case, you almost came to justify an allegation that was an allegation that now becomes part truth, because Uganda had vehemently denied, including from the Minister of Justice, General Kahinda Otafire, saying that there were no Rwandans who were being held here. With this one case, I think it now opened a Pandora's box, just in terms of, especially looking at his particular health when he appeared in court. So that is one side of the story. But there's the other side of the story, which is Uganda has, the way Rwanda has played this, Rwanda has gone, the PR style, upbeat, press conferences, the Twitterata, the Twittersphere went mad in terms of what was being displayed, and therefore you saw a Rwanda that was seriously in pain. Uganda was on the back foot in terms of that, because Uganda's approach was not that, and that to me, despite anything that anyone would say, was really for the good, because had Uganda started opening up another Twittersphere war of its own, I think would have had a more confused situation. And therefore, Uganda's reaction, as slow as it has been, is commendable, because it has managed to hold this a difficult situation in control. The two principals, President Kagame, and then surprise, surprise, we have got two retreats that are happening at the same time. Rwanda has Umwiherero, which is where we actually had a lot of detail coming from President Kagame. The statements that have been quoted were coming from the retreats,
videos,
the Umwiherero. And then from Chankwanzi, President Museveni, now the retreat of the NRM Parliamentary Caucus, which is quite strong in terms of determining what happens, especially in relations when it comes to the legality of these particular aspects. So these two retreats, I think, have come up with very interesting ways in which they are dealing with this particular problem. So, in brief, Charles, it's not like we don't know what's wrong. For me, it's more, why now?
Why now?
That's where my worry is.
Joseph, the approaches, the thing he touches, the approaches, in this era and age of social media, very carefully crafted statements. You've never seen the government of Uganda act so official. I have never seen the government of Uganda act so official in response to a situation. We used to joke before that if you wanted anything, if you wanted Ugandan government officials to contradict each other, call one, someone will tell you something, another one will tell you another thing, another one will tell you another thing, which was the opposite contrast of what came out of Rwanda. Because as journalists, if you call Rwanda, you call one government official there, the Minister of Information, for example, they tell you, okay, give me 30 minutes. Call me back in 30 minutes. Trust me, in those 30 minutes, you call 5 other people. They'll give you the same answer, but after 30 minutes, they'll open up and they'll give you exactly the same answer. Now, it's been the government of Uganda that's been very laid back. If you read the statements of, I think the one from Uganda Revenue Authority came out a little too quickly, but the subsequent ones, Amelia Chamberlain's statement, strictly to her business. Kutesa's first statement, 3 issues, very carefully thought through and just on point. His second statement, stronger than the first statement. Do you think this helps matters like Kasim says, or does this surprise you? And President Museveni has been at 3 events. 2 of them, he completely avoided one. And even now, he's been very careful about his response.
No, the thing is this, Uganda's response has quite frankly been condescending. Because the first time Kagame gave an interview to the East African, the response came from Ofono Opondo. Now, you do not have a scenario where a president speaks something and is actually trying to reach out, saying, you know, maybe Uganda has been misled and maybe what we should be talking. And then the response comes from, you know, from the Ugandan Media Center. So it's only now that, you know, ambassadors have been talking amongst each other, foreign ministers have been talking amongst each other. Now, even Museveni, the question that was asked him at the national retreat in Chankwanzi about the trade with Rwanda, you saw how condescendingly he answered. He said, we'll trade with Ethiopia and Kenya, 700 million Kenya, and so on. When one route closes, another one opens up. And that's totally different from what you see from Kagame, because Kagame is clearly rattled. Because when I saw that speech of his at their retreat, those are not words which are spoken by heads of state. Because heads of state usually issue, as you said, you know, platitudes, thought-out statements, vague statements which are, you know, marked, every word, you know, picked carefully. Now Kagame went all out. The meeting they had personally with Museveni in Ethiopia, he's putting it all out there, and even saying how the president was pretending not to know Rujugiro, and he had to remind him that you actually know him. Those are things which are spoken behind closed doors, and when presidents come out, it's a bit more sanitized. Now, the PR angle that Rwanda always runs on PR, really, because they take it so seriously. Now, by contrast, Museveni, maybe it's an age thing or something. You remember even at national, you know, at State of the Nation, he said, people are telling him about PR. He said, I'm the son of Kaguta, I don't need to be sanitized. So he doesn't believe in all this. And even the social media, I'm sure there are people who, but the thing is, he doesn't see that as so important. But what he's trying to make a statement is that Rwanda is down there. That's what our president is trying to say from the beginning. Whom he sends out. Rwanda is down there. We are here.
Does he know something that we don't? Because if you look at the relationship between President Museveni, people have been playing the clip of President Museveni at Rwanda's anniversary, where he tries to speak some Kinyarwanda, then walks away, asks some other lady to come and speak for him. But really relating with this country as a brotherly state. Do these 2 leaders know things that we don't know? That the approach to the responses they have chosen to this, because if you watch every statement that's come out of Kigali lately, you can see a deliberate effort to communicate to an external audience, not an internal audience. President Kagame speaks in English most of the time. He's not speaking Kinyarwanda. He would have been speaking Kinyarwanda for most for a meeting like that. The traditional Kagame would be speaking for that audience.
Yes.
But now he's sending that message
Yeah.
to someone else.
Yeah. And that person obviously is here. And he's also doing the PR because the truth though is this, the question he asked, why now? Because all these things started a long time ago. Because I remember when, what was he, Brigadier Major General Nobo Mayombo died, President at his funeral blamed a certain neighboring country. And he seemed to be pointing in that direction and saying that they might have had a hand. And there have been so many other insinuations that Rwanda were having a hand in trying to destabilize Uganda. Now, the thing though is when issues like those arise, Museveni wants to keep them on the low because he has to keep the image of being in control. Now, what I saw frankly from that Kagame speech is not somebody terribly in control, because he blocks the border, it hurts them more than it hurts us. And that's the message Museveni is trying to do. And even in the interview by that gentleman, which ran in Sunday Vision today, he's saying how people are complaining of hunger because it's almost 10 times the amount of trade favoring Uganda with, I think, 240 to million to 27, something like that. So they are the ones who are suffering, but he's doing it as if to get attention, and then he's trying to manage the PR and then almost sanitize himself and make himself innocent. He's not anyway as innocent as he sounds in that thing, as if, you know, we are being rattled and the aggressor is the other side. These two are doing aggression against each other. That's the honest truth.
Yes.
And now Museveni is not going to come out and tell you that. He's not going to tell you what he said, spoke with Kagame in Ethiopia. He's not going to say anything that is not for public consumption. Now Kagame has taken things which should have been spoken privately, and is now putting them out there in a video which is recorded and sent around. I think the diplomatic connection has snapped completely between these two.
And I think that's why he actually ignored President Uhuru Kenyatta when he came here. Uganda completely actually ignored him. Rwanda opened up to Uhuru, had a conversation with Uhuru, and they sent a message with him to Uganda. But Uganda completely decided we're going to speak to President Uhuru Kenyatta. And I think, like you've all said, for the first time, Uganda is playing diplomacy, and good diplomacy for the very first time. We're actually playing it right.
This is how it should be.
This is how, yes.
That's how it should be.
I'll tell you something.
The problem is
Barbara.
it's not being reciprocated.
I'll tell you something, which is slight disagreement from you, Joseph. I think the silent treatment, rather than being seen as condescending, is a message that I think the government of Uganda and President Museveni, because he put a gag order on his government officials not to just speak anyhow.
Yes.
We
Exactly,
sent, at the East African, one of my colleagues went to interview a government official who knows what is going on. She was kept outside for some time. She'd agreed to give the interview. I will say who it is, the Minister for Regional Cooperation. He'd agreed to speak, but then after some time, a secretary came and said, told my colleague Dictor Simo, said, step outside for a moment, and then went and whispered to the minister, the president has said you shouldn't be talking. and the interview was dead. Immediately. We never did that interview. President Uhuru Kenyatta, you see, the moment President Kagame closes the border, what we are receiving now is that the population in Rwanda was prepared for this. The business community was prepared for the border closure. It's not like it happened to them all of a sudden. It is the Ugandan side that was caught flat-footed by surprise. But Kagame flies to Dar es Salaam, has a meeting with President Magufuli. Then, the very next day, President Uhuru Kenyatta flies into Kigali, picks a message from there, flies to Kampala, and tries to put the message across. Though, as we're reporting in the East African, he was more here to present himself as available to play mediator. But the question is, how does President Museveni look at these colleagues of his? Does he look at them as peers that you can have a discussion with, you can rely on to have, that they can they summon the two principals and say, please come and we have a discussion about this? Or
who would have that power?
Who would have that power within the region?
The issue I've had, Charles, and this is the reason I was saying, for the first time, Uganda has played it, and despite any way that anybody would interpret it, as it has played it very, very cleverly. This situation could actually be very explosive. Charles, I was at, what's this hotel? White Horse Inn in Kabale. Flashback 1999. Kisangani 1 had just happened. The two leaders came and met. I was head of Rwanda television at that time. So I'd come in as a Rwandan journalist, joining the Ugandan team. The presidents went into a meeting for about 3 hours. They came out. At that very time, the border had not been closed, but they had blocked Ugandan goods. Ugandan milk was no longer going there because Rwanda now was creating capacity to produce its own milk. Ugandan matoke was not being allowed in. I spoke to the Minister of Agriculture at that time, Dr. Ephraim Kabaija, on the Rwandan side, and asked a very straight question. I think it was Victoria Sechtoreko who was the minister this time. Yes, for agriculture. So, so when I put the question, I put the question very bluntly, does Rwanda have the capacity to sustain the blockade that has just come in? There's a way that the two leaders looked. And the question was never really directly answered. But 1999, 2019, we are back here. So when I say that there are certain things,
would you answer that question now?
there are lots of known unknowns. And that for me was quite telling.
1999 to 2019.
Yes.
Does Rwanda have the capacity to sustain a blockade like is happening?
Well, we are
Especially on
journalists. We do ask the questions, so I would still throw it to the officials, like I did then, and then probably see what sort of answer that I get. But what is important for me is that while we have had the accusations from the Rwandan side, sometimes valid. I mean, because if you're saying people have been, arrested or whatever, Uganda has not brought its side, and that's why I'm saying this has been carefully crafted. Because what would happen now? We've had incidents now in Nachivari, the refugee camp. We've had disappearances, we've had kidnaps, we've had deaths of people from there. The allegation from ISO, CMI, has been that Rwandan state agents have been crossing and coming and getting people and killing them, or rather kidnapping them. If Uganda had come up and gone very public with these kinds of allegations, the story now would be everybody trying to be on the defensive. And that's why I'm saying, for the things that we have not had, they have helped to keep the situation at least in control. Because you'll hear the Rwandan side, which has been made very loudly. If Uganda started making its case, you would have a case. You would have a situation. Two, when the two leaders met, and this is one thing that was actually, President Kagame has pointed it out, but in April last year, when President Kagame came, again, the situation was not that good. We were at State House in Entebbe. They went again for a closed meeting. Again, I got a chance to ask a question, which again was deliberately avoided. But here is the situation, because Rwanda had submitted a case at that time saying they are recruiting, RNC is recruiting people here in Uganda, taking them to Burundi via Tanzania, a group that was arrested, of 40 young men who were arrested, who are coming from Uganda, who had been issued Ugandan passports. You could see like there was a trail. President Museveni says to President Kagame, I'm going to look into these allegations and we will get back to you. Uganda has not brought up, because probably in this interesting new diplomatic line that we have, probably we'll get a line that will come to explain a few of these unknown unknowns or unknown knowns, because they're there.
It will not happen. Because it will not happen because Uganda is not going to state its case. But the truth is, the allegations about people being taken out of camps here, or people who are being killed, and even the whole connection with MTN and what they were accused of abetting things to do with, the whole communication and everything, and for the reasons for which people were, deported. All these things are not going to come out in the open. But the reality is, there is, as he says, speech from, intelligence people that the police had been infiltrated. I think we know that, okay? And things were being done, and there was a clandestine move to come and kind of disorganize the security in Uganda. And that's what led to the whole Kayihura situation and so on. And there are even rumors that Kayihura probably is now out because he cut a deal and told them everybody was involved. And now those people are being picked up. Now Kagame says in his speech hundreds, okay, by his estimation. He said hundreds. Now, I don't know where the hundreds are. I know the gentleman whom you're speaking about, who I was familiar with that case. But there will be collateral, okay? But amidst the collateral, they actually are people who were here and were trying to clandestinely, perhaps even, cause regime change. Now, I think that's what is causing a lot of anger, that Uhuru Kenyatta is ignored. I don't want to talk to that person because how can he even think about doing this? How can it get to this point? Now, of course, they will say it's because also he's trying to do the same the other side. And this has been going on for all these years, for more than about 20 years. So the thing is, I think this time, Rwanda was closer than it has ever been. That's why you're going to get silence from Uganda, because if they actually told us how close, maybe they would look vulnerable, which nobody wants to do, at least not, you know, our president. So there will be silence, but then there are things which are happening other scenes, and there are people whom we know.
How do you respond to those very, very pointed statements the president has made, President Museveni has made? Actually, both presidents. President Kagame said, going down on your knees is a choice. You can threaten me, you can do everything else to me, but to put me down on my knees, that's a choice, and I will not make that choice. Then President Museveni says, if we mobilize ourselves, you can threaten us. We cannot be defeated. These are very, very carefully thought through statements. Presidents are not throwing these just out there like that. But one of the major questions people are asking, you have two landlocked countries. Uganda is completely landlocked. Rwanda is completely landlocked. President Museveni boasts about opening other markets. With a bit of stability in South Sudan, business is going on there. The Bunagana border post into the DRC has been very active. It has a terrible road on the other side, but it's been very, very active because traffic is being diverted there. And you have other accesses to the Democratic Republic of Congo market. So there you can find, and then you have Kenya open. If you're President Kagame, how does it feel that you're somehow boxing yourself in? You have a rift with Kampala. You have no connection in, President Kagame talks about Burundi and how many Rwandans are going to Burundi free and coming back. Burundi, that one has been closed. And the relationship with Tanzania has been on and off for much of the time. The DR Congo has always been problematic, though the minister the other day went there to discuss. If you're a landlocked country, you're a fairly small economy, how do you sustain some of these things? How do you rally people?
Well, I think people are rallied in Rwanda. That's what you're asking. It's through coercion. Honestly, everybody knows you're not going to stand in Rwanda and say some of the things that you'd perhaps get away with in Uganda. Not perhaps, you definitely get away with in Uganda. So somehow people will be rallied. And that was also alluded to in that man who is at the heart of all this, Rujugiro, his interview, saying how...
We should have had Rujugiro on coming online, but we've had a difficulty in connection, and also David Himbara. We're trying, I think the studio is trying to reach David Himbara. He should have been on speaking to us, and as soon as we have him, he'll join us in the... So
saying that it's alluded
to... He could answer some of these questions.
Because you could see there was a deliberate effort on his part to more or less belittle Kagame. You know, if I sponsored rebels against him, he would be down in 6 months. That's what he told the Sunday Vision.
He told me a month.
Now, at least he amended it to 6 months, which is more respectful to what's happening in Kigali. Then he goes ahead to say that the people of that country, as far as he knows, are not happy, and they will come up with a solution themselves without his help. And these are very pointed statements from somebody who knows. And he was even asked, you know, whether he would go and reconcile with Kagame, and he said he has no business. So it was really a put-off, and he doesn't care what happens there. Now, on the other hand, this side, one of the prerequisites, as far as we are told, for there to be any talk between the two heads of state is that that man is removed from Uganda, closes down his businesses here, which he estimates at $100 million. That's quite a sum for businesses, especially in places like Arua. And would Museveni tell him, close down your businesses here for the sake of us having a relationship in Rwanda? Or is it easier for Museveni to tell Rwanda, you'll be fine, we are going to continue doing our business? After all, you're not the only one aggrieved. We are aggrieved too. And we have to get that. Just because Rwanda is good at PR doesn't mean that Uganda is aggrieved too.
I'm afraid,
yes,
Barbara,
Uganda has been the theater. And so it's... Actually, we are suffering more than even Rwanda talk about it. But I don't think Rwanda can actually sustain a war if the war was to break out. And we know that for foodstuffs, even education, they all depend on Uganda. we know that for even communication, if you talk about MTN, Rwanda's server, the data was being hosted in Uganda. So if we are hosting Rwanda's data in Uganda, how much can they survive? How long can they actually survive if a war breaks out?
I think they resolved that. They punished MTN for that.
Yes, exactly. But
so
if
Rwanda
that's
has punished
happened,
MTN, and
for
Uganda
that,
has also
yes.
gone after MTN because of
that.
And then key also at Chankwan, sorry to interrupt you, Museveni met the heads of Airtel and MTN.
Yes.
And what was at the heart of it? Security in their networks, which he felt had been breached
Yes.
in favor of Rwanda. That's why all those people were deported. So
Yes,
now
and now they've promised actually.
Barbara, hold your
There's also
thoughts.
that.
So I'm afraid let's take a commercial break, then we'll pick up this discussion in a moment. We'll be right back. You're still watching The Fourth Estate, and we're continuing the discussion on this intricate situation between Kampala and Kigali, where Kampala has been giving Kigali, but actually Kampala hasn't been silent. I mean, you have official statements coming out explaining different things. Minister Sam Kutesa accused Rwanda of imposing a trade embargo on Uganda, which was, I think, one of the strongest statements to come out of here.
but was discussing symptoms and not the cause.
Yeah, you see, we are only responding to what Rwanda
has
done. Actually, we're not
done.
even responding to what Rwanda is saying, but we're responding to the action, the closure of the borders. Nothing else. We're not responding to anything else. And so when Rwanda says that we are hosting the Rwanda National Congress, we are hosting Nyamwasa and his boys, we're not responding to that. We're not actually talking about the real issues that Rwanda is actually talking about. We are not. And I think also partly because Uganda knows that Rwanda, you see, Nyamwasa was even a government official in Uganda in the 1980s because he was the district commissioner of Kitgum for a very long time. And so when they went back, people saw and was like, hey, our district commissioner is fighting in Rwanda. People were shocked. You see, so
just like they must have been shocked when President Paul Kagame, imagine from being deputy at CMI,
and they're seeing him. Yeah.
Yes.
So imagine how much these people know Uganda and the operations of the government of Uganda, and how much Uganda knows about Rwanda right now. I don't think we know much about Rwanda right now, how it operates and what's happening. Because Rwanda still got its roots, they still have their people here, they still have their contacts here. If they want to actually spy on Uganda and get information, they have everyone in this country to do it.
Which is the bigger question, Barbara, and I want to stay with you. Given the very, very close connections between Uganda and Rwanda, almost every Ugandan, especially Ugandans Central South, has a relative or somebody they know very closely who is Munyarwanda. That person might maintain connections with Kigali because that's home base, but actually they're Ugandan. How, in what mind gets a person to think that you can put these two countries apart and say, one of our colleagues, there are many Ugandans actually, who are coming, someone I know has married a Rwandan woman when he was working in Kigali. They have children. He was returning home because his job ended in Kigali. He's decided to come back home. He's a guy from eastern Uganda. He arrives at the border and they say, you're Ugandan, go. These children, they're your children, yes. They're Ugandan, they can go. Their mother goes back. Is our person.
Wow.
We'll not let them go through. If relations are that close, you've had Rwandans living in this country, creating relationships, intermarriages, creating homes and friends since 1959, at least officially, since about 1959.
Yeah.
That's more than 50 years of a close relationship. Even before then, people will trace relations to hundreds of years.
Exactly.
Is it sustainable really that you can put a stop and say those guys don't like us, we cannot be with them because they're picking up and arresting people? Sometimes it's difficult because if you speak to government officials here, they will tell you the people Rwanda says have been arrested in Uganda, majority of them either came as refugees or carry different passports. DR Congo passports. I think we have David Himbara. David, do we have you? Hello, David? David Himbara, do we have you? Hello, David, we can hear something in the background. Could you come to the phone and speak to us, please? Hello? I think we might have to go on as we try to get a connection to David Himbara. David Himbara, for people who don't know, he was a special assistant to President Paul Kagame for years. He also grew up and lived in Uganda for many years, and then worked like majority of the RPF. Went back with that group and worked with President Kagame. Then disagreed and left. Now, David Himbara is an advisor to Tribat Rujugiro. When we couldn't get Tribat, we thought we could have an interview with David. He'd agreed to speak to us, but I think the connection is failing us at the moment. As soon as we have him, we'll be able to get. If the relations, Barbara, if I go back to my question, if the relations are that closely knit, where do you draw a line? They can be used for spying, as you said. They can be very effective, but that works either way. You don't need an interpreter.
Yeah, but then now, I think the question that Uganda is grappling with right now is the allegiance of these people. Do they pay allegiance to Rwanda or to Uganda? Do you trust them or don't you trust them? Because they're employed here. They are actually Ugandans. They're no longer Rwandans. They're actually Ugandans, and they hold Ugandan passports, the Ugandan citizens. So do you then become suspicious of every citizen you have of Rwandan origin, and then you lock them up? Or do you actually,
And how deep does it go?
Yes,
how deep
exactly.
does it go?
It's a very tricky question.
The that very same question is, if you are, can Kigali then demand your loyalty as a Rwandan citizen?
No.
Because you can ask it either way. Kampala can be suspicious, but who do you be suspicious of and who don't you get suspicious of? The same question applies to Rwanda.
Yeah. Well, the thing is,
where do you draw the line?
It's almost like a North Korea, South Korea sort of thing, where I don't know, maybe demilitarized zone, a war, or East and West, German, something like that, because there is no way you can separate these two countries. Quite frankly, if it's not a relative, it's an in-law or something, people who are here. But Rwanda is, I think, the third biggest tribe, according to the last census, or thereabout, in Uganda. So how do you handle that? Now, how do you manage things like allegiance, as she said? And the thing is, can Kigali demand their allegiance? Even if Kigali doesn't demand it, will they give it to them or to, Because, people of Rwandan origin are famously, love their country. So would they give it to them or to us? That's the one thing that I'm sure we cannot get into a war with Rwanda for. Because if it was military, just Ugandan military versus Rwandan military, I don't think they stand a chance. We spend a lot of money on importing military hardware. Actually, it's our biggest import.
We clashed, we fought 3 times.
I know.
In Kisangani.
That was then, but...
And they beat us.
But it was not
but
necessarily...
the instructions were clear, though. That's the one side that nobody ever talks about. The instructions from Kampala regarding those Kisangani clashes were very clear. That is something that I found out very recently and very interestingly.
What were they?
The instructions from Kampala.
Beat us?
Well, whether we allow them beat us is a different thing. But the instructions from what I've come to see, actually shown from military records, is slightly different. So even when we talk about the 3 times of clashing,
what were the instructions?
I'm kind of in between there. But the idea was avoid escalation. So whether now it's in self-defense and you are beaten or whatever, but there was a very clear line on avoiding this escalation. And that I have seen, I've witnessed.
As in 99, 2000,
yes,
and then
yes.
you mean all the 3 times they were trying to avoid
yes,
the escalation?
No, then there was one particular skirmish that involved a commander who had not taken commands. He had refused to. He had refused lawful orders. That is what I've heard.
The one who pounded the sick bay.
that is what I have heard. But though, Charles, my only issue was about the allegiance. Allegiance in terms of what? Because it would also determine that. I think I'm on the panel, I might be one of those that are actually closest in terms of that. One of my parents is Rwandese. So I fall into those categories. I've not suffered at any one point in any way about where my allegiances would lie. and my allegiances would be in the two countries existing together comfortably, without having any problems. So when we get into a problem situation, and may God forbid, I have not had even to think about that, because that question had not come up. That's why I was wondering where, if we talk about allegiance in terms of what?
Let me say something.
Taking weapons and going to fight, or allegiance just in terms of the thinking or the feeling
Joseph,
about
let me say this, because it was told to me on an on-the-record interview that I did, which we should have run, by Tribert Rujugiro. I asked him, how did you fall out with President Kagame? And he said, I supported the struggle. I went back home. I started investing. Rujugiro left his country, lived in Rwanda after he was born, up to about the age of 17. Then he fled to Burundi. Lived in Burundi into adulthood until he was a much, much older person, established businesses. Then fled. I left Burundi, went and lived for some period in South Africa. After 1994, he was part of the Rwandan exiles who supported the RPF to return back home. He goes back home, lives in Kigali for about 10 years, establishes businesses. And then he said, he told me that one day, I think around 2009, they invited to an event at President Kagame's home. While there, his wife is pulled aside and told, you are talking to and visiting Mrs. Let Fred Rujema. That lady hates us. She's an enemy. Please cut off contact. And then Rujugiro said, when my wife told me that, my wife said, but we are family, so I just can't walk away from this. And when they discussed that, he said, I believed from then onwards, this is not a country I can continue to stay in, and a government I can support, because I wouldn't imagine that you would be required to draw lines like that. Which brings us to the question we're asking. If relations are this intricate, everybody's demanding your loyalty. At some stage, you don't know. I'm holding a Ugandan passport. There's a girl we worked with at the Monitor for some time. She tried to apply for a Ugandan passport. She's Ugandan of Rwandese origin. She tried, and they bounced her at immigration. That's a few years ago. And she was extremely frustrated. She said, I have no relative. I do not know anybody in Rwanda. Where are you telling me to go? Then crossed over, I think, after getting frustrated, crossed over to Rwanda and was able to get a Rwandan passport and moved on with her life. It puts these people in a very difficult situation, because you're being split in a manner that you can't afford to split yourself. Are these two leaders behind us on the screen looking at it, or who's looking at it from that perspective?
Let me tell you this. There is not going to be an escalation, because Museveni is a very pragmatic person. That's why he even told that person whom you are going to interview that don't say anything, because now he can't trust somebody to say something that anybody, the way it usually is, every official has their own version of events. He can't trust them because they can cause an escalation. What he's doing right now is he's just taking a back seat, and I think waiting for Kagame to go through whatever he's going through right now. And after some time, they are going to sit and talk, because he's a very pragmatic person, and he knows that it is not in anybody's interests whatsoever that this country has got to war. I don't think that the way he is, even in Kisangani, as he said, I had that version of event one time from a soldier who was there. And he said the first clash they hammered us because we were told, make sure you do not cause any escalation. And they were exercising a lot of restraint, but the other side was not. So there's all this thing, and yet even the second time there was still the same order. Please do not make sure this does not go. So the pragmatism of the person that is Museveni means that he's behaving this way as just a run-up to eventually them agreeing. I know that for sure. There's not going to be an escalation.
But then that begs the question, why is it that Uganda is always very careful with Rwanda? It's because of the relationship.
The relationship that exists.
Yes.
But
that
just also the dilemma, Barbara, here is this one very difficult situation. For Uganda now to be asked, and actually there's a Kinyarwanda word they use for that, which is munyangire. Because I've hated someone, then you have to hate them if you are to remain my friend. And sometimes it does not necessarily work like that. So what has happened is that it's people who went back to Rwanda, assisted by Uganda to go back to Rwanda. They get to Rwanda and then they get their disagreements. through those disagreements, people run away, and then some remain in Rwanda. And now Rwanda is asking
sorry,
Uganda now to forget those
I got to interrupt because I think we got a connection now. Hello, David. David.
Hello.
Hello, David.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, sir. We've been struggling to get to you. I'm happy that we finally got a connection with you.
Thank you much.
Thank you. David, I have in studio with me here Joseph Kabuleta. I have Kasim Kaira and Barbara Among. All of them are very senior journalists. And we're discussing this Uganda-Rwanda situation. You are Rwandan,
Yeah.
You're now living in exile, but you served with the government of Rwanda for some time and lived in Uganda. What is your reading of the situation as it is? And you are also speaking for other Rwandans in your situation.
I think that basically the main problem we have in Rwanda is that you have one man, President Paul Kagame, that determines everything, sometimes without fully understanding the consequences. So unlike you in Uganda, where you have the parliament that summons government, engages government on behalf of people, we don't have that. The Rwandan parliament, basically you have people who are not elected by constituencies. They come from political party lists. So case in point is this border closure. Only somebody who is insane would close an international border through which a country's exports and imports transit. It's just not normal. If this was debated, had this been debated, no matter what the issues are, it would not have gone this far, leading us now to a situation where the people who made this decision don't even seem to know what to do next. I think they expected that Uganda would kind of kneel and beg for opening the borders, but since that didn't happen, they don't know what to do.
David,
so if you ask me what the problem is, basically is that we have essentially a government that is totally unaccounted.
You worked with this government very closely, and this president you're talking about now. When did you realize? When did you realize that that government was unaccountable? That it was dictatorial?
I actually worked for President Kagame twice, from 2000 to 2002, and then things did not work out. Basically, he would not take advice. So I left, and then he invited me back. I worked again for him from 2006 to 2010. 2010 is when things really got very violent. People disappearing, people ending up dead. Some attempted assassinations outside Rwanda. I said, no, this wasn't for me. So that's when I left for South Africa. And when Patrice Karegeya, who died at the end of that year in 2013, I decided that South Africa was not safe either, so I came back. I went to Canada, where I had lived before going back to Africa.
How does it feel for you, David? And I informed our viewers that we should have had Mr. Tribert Rujugiro, somebody I think you know very well and have worked closely with. How does it feel for you that you participated in the struggle to return and end your years in exile, but you ended up back in exile? Actually, contact from someone someone asked me to ask that question to you deliberately, specifically, and say you fought to end your years in exile, but you ended up back in exile. How does that feel?
Okay, no, thank you so much for that question. Let me make it clear. I personally did not claim that I participated in a struggle because I grew up in Canada. But people like Tribert, Rujurai Abatwa, these are people who raised resources to support the struggle. And their main purpose was that they had been refugees for 30 years, and most often where they were refugees, they were never given any rights. So when RPF came about, they thought that this was an opportunity to end statelessness. So they contributed all they could. And that's how, we all went back to Rwanda after 1994, hoping that now we have a government that is accountable to all, that would unify Rwandans of all persuasions, all ethnic groups, and so on. Mm. But the regime now there is basically replaying the same, no, even worse than the one that was there before. Because you see, business people, one of the business people who thrived during Habyarimana, they are not able to thrive now. Those who went back, the guy like Tribert was the leading businessman there. Built a $20 million mall, was in housing, in P, and he was even advising. He was a member of a Presidential Advisory Council. Tribert also had helped Paul Kagame's family, Wayne Obote, through the Rwandan refugees out of Uganda. So now, then President Kagame turns around, hijacked the mall. But by the way, I must say that Tribert is not unique. We've heard of people like Asinapor Wigara. Mm. Most of these Rwandan businessmen have faced a similar situation. The difference with Tribert is that he has businesses all over, so he can leave. And he can go to Uganda, South Africa, Angola, Nigeria, South Sudan, who knows? He has options. But his colleagues don't have options. It's a very, very disturbing situation. The reason being that RPF itself is in business. This thing called Crystal Venture, owned by Kagame and RPF, it controls almost all aspects of economy of Rwanda. So it's a country full of contradictions, full of total confusion. But I think now, if you ask me, I guess to answer the question of the person who posed the question, how do people who supported this feel now? Oh, they're depressed. They're very, very depressed. A lot of them have left again. Some of them have died mysteriously. Others are just lying quietly there in poverty. So it's a hope. Most people think that the situation is now worse than it was under Habyarimana.
Two quick questions for you. One is the Rwandan government accuses some of you, and particularly has accused Tribert of funding the activities of RNC. Is that true?
Let me put it this way. Kagame has been hunting Tribert since 2009. 2009, there was no RNC. There was none. RNC came much later. The freeing of Rwanda by Tribert and others began earlier. So that's just a myth. This is the typical Kagame looking for a scapegoat. The RNC are all these people who were high up in the system. They were his lieutenants. They were the military people.
Mm. Just one last question for you, David. You know as well as I do that both Kampala and Kigali are watching this show and closely monitoring this interview we're doing with you. So I am afraid if you speak to President Paul Kagame, what would you say to him? And if you're saying to speak to President Yoweri Museveni, who I believe is also monitoring this show and watching it, what would you say to them as a way to end this current standoff?
Oh, thank you so much for that question. Let me say, what would I tell Kagame? Mr. President Paul Kagame, General Paul Kagame, stop this. I remind you of what President Kikwete told you in 2013. He told you to stop fighting and talk to all these groups that are all over the place. Stop fighting. Talk. Most of all, do not ever dare close an international border. Mr. Kagame, you just broke all the rules. International rules, East African Treaty. East African Treaty calls you, demands that you allow free movement of capital and people. You do not close a border, and do not confuse by saying that you did not close the border, that it was Gatuna being fixed and so on. No, that is not true. So,
what's your message to him?
Now, my message now to President Yoweri Museveni. Mr. President, you've been very patient. You raised all of us, not you, Uganda raised all of us, and was with us refugees who were able to return. Without your support, this could never have happened. Now, but however, enough is enough. Mr. President, Uganda is a sovereign nation. It cannot be dictated by anyone that do this, do that, close this business, close that business. Mr. President, we ask you to treat Tribat like any other business. If he's abiding by laws of the country, judge him according to that. Do not force him or anybody to close business because some regime in the neighborhood says so. Moreover, a regime that shot itself in the foot by kicking out this same very man who is worth and creates employment and opportunities for development. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. David Himbara, for joining us on the Fourth Estate.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. With that, we will take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we'll be returning domestic and talking about the NRM caucus retreat in Chankwanzi. We'll be right back. Welcome back. This last segment of the Fourth Estate, and we're now moving to Chankwanzi, where members of the National Resistance Movement caucus in Parliament have been retreating, and they passed a resolution earlier today. I want to get to that resolution and read a bit from it before we bring on Honorable Margaret Muhanga. She's a member of Parliament for Borasha County in Kabarole District, and she is the spokesperson of the NRM caucus. Honorable Muhanga, very nice to have you on the Fourth Estate.
Thank you, and good evening.
Good evening. I know you're one of our most ardent viewers, so I'd like to take the opportunity to thank you for being an ardent viewer of the Fourth Estate.
I really love watching Fourth Estate. You know, I was a journalist for 9 years.
Yes.
So if I don't watch the Fourth Estate, then I would be doing myself injustice. That's always a fan of journalists, and I would always want to hear what views they have on topical issues.
Thank you. You've been retreating in Chankwanzi with your colleagues, members of parliament, and you made a resolution to support the resolution of the Central Executive Committee to ask President Yoweri Museveni to continue leading the NRM through 2021 and beyond, and you're asking him to consider running as a sole candidate for the party. Can you confirm that?
Yes, we have.
What are you guys thinking? Someone might ask, what are you thinking in passing a resolution like that?
But this resolution is not new. Remember that chairpersons of districts, all the 134 districts of Uganda, already endorsed President Museveni in 2016, a few months after we had gotten out of the election. And so the Central Executive Committee also followed suit. For us as the NRM, I don't see why it should even be anybody's business. This is our candidate who we feel can get us a win. This is the candidate that we feel has driven our country that far. He found this country in ruins. Uganda is now one of the fastest growing economies in Africa. And actually, it's projected that by 2025, Uganda will be the fastest growing economy in the world. So if you have a good leader that has driven this country that far, a leader that has shown skills in every aspect of life, why get rid of him when we can still use his wisdom, his energy, his vision? Why should we?
In your statement, and I would like to bring in, I apologize, I didn't introduce the other guys I have in studio. I have Joseph Kabuleta, you know him very well. I have Kasim Kayira, I believe you know him very well, and Barbara Among. I want to bring them into this discussion with you. The bigger question, gentlemen and ladies, the two ladies, Barbara and Margaret, the bigger question some Ugandans have been asking, in the NRM statement, they appreciate President Yoweri Museveni's sacrifice and contribution over a period of 50 years. 50 years. 33 of those, he's been president of Uganda and leader of the NRM directly. The other years, he spent them in the struggle. The other 17 years, he spent them in the struggle. And the question is, what statement is the NRM making as a party that 50 years down the road, you can't find someone else to pick the baton from President Yoweri Museveni and run the race to the finish line, to wherever that finish line might be? It could be transforming Uganda into a modern economy. That can't you allow President Museveni to play another role and allow him to retire and play with his grandchildren? You're hanging onto him. What statement are they making? Barbara, let me start with you. And you can put the question back to Margaret.
You should start with
I'll volunteer. The statement they are making is one of survival. Because that's what this politics of this country has become. They know whether they disagree with him or not, whether they tell him he's not going to be, they want somebody else or not, he is going to be the one. Because that's what he wants, and he has all the factors in his hands. So what they are doing is, agreeing with him, so much with their stomachs, perhaps more than their hearts, for the purpose of survival. That's what it is. That's what politics in Uganda has become. Survival, survival, survival. So that's what they are doing. So they are just learning how to move in the lane. That's so even us trying to intellectualize this debate as if there is any debate or anything like that is a waste of time, quite frankly, because even the people who are criticizing them, so many of them, given the chance, would go there and do the exact same thing for the same result, to live a good life and take children to school and so on. That's what it has become about. So,
Charles, the interesting thing is I've just come from Chankwanzi. Ended up spending a night there accidentally because we were supposed to come back. The president, I think, had an engagement. Was too late to be able to address the members of parliament, and therefore he slept in Chankwanzi, and therefore he couldn't leave before he made his speech. So we had a night in Chankwanzi, and that was really significant because quite often it's these off-the-record discussions that you have with people that really make the story. For me, the idea was more, not so much what is in it for the president, but what's in it for the MPs. While they are going to deliver this, because remember, SEC, the Central Executive Committee, had already declared the sole candidacy. The MPs were only in Chankwanzi now to come to endorse what had already been decided by the higher organ. The point then was, what is in it for them? We had discussions with several MPs already worried about the amendment to Article 102B, about the likelihood, the huge likelihood of them losing the 2021 vote in terms of their own constituencies. Worried about what happens to them off the back of that. We've had situations where we've had MPs who have lost seats and you find them actually looking like rascals in town, I'm sorry, for lack of a better word. So many of the MPs, or several of the MPs who were there, were sort of to say, Mr. President, we're here to deliver you this, but what are you giving us in return? So it was so much more about what's in it for them.
And one of the things they
as a guarantee.
And one of the things they asked for is that those who have served well are delivered away from the vagaries of an NRM primary. So they automatically get the NRM seat in the 2021, and now that means if they are the NRM MP and the president has to make sure he has the majority in parliament again, then that means the burden of re-election turns away from them to him.
To him, because
so they have to be funded.
There's something fundamental that Joseph phrased. They could negotiate what is in it for them, but they are negotiating from a weaker position. Would they avoid it? If Yoweri Museveni wants it, would they avoid it? Do they have an option?
Well, they don't have. There's absolutely no option for NRM MPs, even the district chairpersons who are going to come after them, and even the national conference that they're going to have after that. They all don't have options because it's a politics of patronage. Like Joseph and Kasim have said, it's about what's in it for them. But I think that there are two issues here. One, I think NRM as a political party, they still have the communist ideology of monopoly, where it's monopoly of the leaders, but then also monopoly of the party. Everything within the party, nothing outside the party. If there's anything outside the party, they're going to oppose it. That's why they come up and beat the opponents. That's why they say there's no freedom of us. They so much believe in the public management, public order management act. Because they believe, the communists who believe it's NRM and nothing outside the NRM. And also, you remember that during that's why they first came up with the movement's political system. And they are not yet, they're still within the movement.
That.
They're not yet looking beyond that.
Charles, sorry to interrupt just a little bit, because you are Barbara says that they are coming to this from a weak point of view. You raised it and Barbara seems to agree. I don't think entirely that they are coming from a weak point of view. Remember, if this amendment that is being mooted is going to happen, there will have to be a vote in parliament. One of the concerns actually that I've found with the RPF party, with the NRM party, is the fact that many people subscribe to a party, yet it is almost now the party subscribing to these people in this particular instance. It's people giving money to the party to run. In the case of NRM, you find that it's people going to the party to suck the party of money. When we come to a point where now they have to vote. But that's what I'm saying.
Honorable Mahanga, if you're still online with us, do we have you?
Yes, I am.
Yes. Well, I don't know if the people go to the party to get money from them.
People suck money from the party
basically because they know there's something to eat.
Contribute money to the party, and I wonder how the NRM actually works.
I'd like you to respond to the some of the discussion you've had in the studio, but also confirm one other thing. There has been talk about you as the NRM caucus in Parliament and as members of Parliament broadly, plotting to change the voting system for the president. Can you shed some light on that?
Okay, let me first start by answering some of these questions that were raised.
Can I have someone in studio to raise up your volume a little bit, please?
Joseph is really
Thank you.
in a very narrow perspective of what is happening in Chankwanzi, especially on this issue of members of parliament living off handouts from the president. Seriously speaking, President Museveni is voted by millions of Ugandans each time he contests. They all live off his handouts. It's a very narrow path that he's taking us to. There are so many Ugandans that vote for Museveni and they've never seen it. But because we have seen his good deeds, how he has transformed the country, what is happening in the countryside, and that's how they come to vote for him. So you can't say NRM MPs are being selfish. If we were selfish, NRM wouldn't even have the majority in parliament, would all be thrown out. But year after year, election after another, the NRM still comes out strong and better. Because even in most places in Uganda, it's NRM competing against itself. And so you can't say it's because people are selfish. Who is pushing the selfish agenda? Even if I were Margaret Mohanga who wanted to get something small from the president, I wouldn't put the other lot behind me into trouble. I mean, if they didn't want, they would say, please get out of here. Because you went to fulfill your own personal interest. It's because the people, what I read, still love Museveni. They've seen the vision. We all have seen it. Even those who argue otherwise know it. That the country has really made a lot of strides. It's now better. It's opened opportunities for everyone to thrive, unless somebody doesn't want to do anything. By and large, we cannot take that narrow path. We can only say that not all MPs. I have seen somebody tweeting that somebody, same with Uganda, said half of the NRM MPs are below average. I don't know what it means. I don't know what there is in the opposition. Because I know many people in the opposition who can do nothing. But they are there, and no one talks about it. But because they are insignificant others, we sometimes have to keep quiet. Because you can't keep throwing stones when you are living in a glass house. We keep quiet just because we want to make peace in Uganda. Now, the other issue you raised is the one of the Westminster system. That the majority members of parliament, the majority party that brings the highest number of members of parliament chooses their presidential candidate. No, it doesn't work like that. By the time you go for the polls, you already know this is the presidential candidate we shall have, the president of that party. Remember, even here in Uganda, that's the system we're using. It just changed to adult suffrage with the Museveni. And I don't think a lot of members of parliament had that idea, that electioneering is taking too much money. People start electioneering immediately we are elected. I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And also the resources that go, the time that the president put in this election becomes too much, too stressful. 6 months into electioneering, remember, it takes about 1.5 years from our primaries into nominating the presidential candidate, going towards the elections. No one is doing anything. Every day, everybody is thinking about where to go next for a campaign rally. Now, if there was no presidential candidate and these MPs go and fend for themselves with the constituency, I mean, we would be much better than going to spend a hell of money just have an election. And also, the president would have time to plan for the country. If it is a president, anyway, if it's a president, an incumbent president. But if it's not a president, an incumbent president, still it's a lot better for the person who knows that his party is on the ground, that he's going to be the president. He would be thinking of what next for the country, other than thinking of where am I going to get this vote from. So a lot of resources are required to run an election. All presidential candidates are given money by our taxpayers to go and look for votes. All of them are given escorts. They are given police cars. All these are earning allowances. But MPs move on their own. One person, you just go look for the votes on your own, and then the majority members of parliament choose their. They don't actually choose, because by the time they go on the ground,
I hear you. Thank you for confirming. Thank you for confirming that. What about the alleged push also to put a lower age cap? Is that coming from the caucus?
Nobody has said that. Not even one person has suggested it. I even don't know where it has come from.
Okay.
Because the Westminster type of elections, a lot of people are talking about it. Why don't we go this way? To just reduce all the money that we are using could go to service delivery. It could go to building roads, extending electricity to every village.
Thank you.
But
Thank you.
nobody
Thank you. Hearing that, let me bring in the panelists on that very issue. Many people listening to Margaret and who have been interacting with this will actually tell you that the reasons that Margaret is giving and the NRM is giving are just a dress up of the real reason. One that, yes, when it talks about the president resting and planning for the party, that's agreeable because campaigns exhaust anybody who participates in them, and especially that President Museveni is one age, but the period he has been in service and in sacrifice drains him a lot more. So that could be a very good justification. But the other one is you're coming from an amendment of the Constitution that might have rattled a lot of people, and you do not know how they would respond. I don't know which version.
No, here's the thing.
Yes.
It's very unfortunate because I saw the letter that came out of there, and you see, it's you know how he's such a vision. You know, privileged to have him and so on, and you know, like.
I want to read it for you, to read the whole letter, because I have not seen a statement.
The level of psychophancy is so appalling. I mean, even if it is politics of survival, maybe that we can kind of excuse, if not condone. But this is, you know, how do you know a vision and what he wants to rest? Let him retire. That's it. How better can somebody rest than just leaving the presidency?
Let me read the letter.
He's going on 75 very soon,
yes.
And you're saying now you want to go to Westminster style because the president wants to rest? You know, he has earned it. Why doesn't he just go and rest?
Let me run through the letter for the benefit of our viewers who may not have seen it yet. This is the resolution, motion, that the National Resistance Movement Parliamentary Caucus meeting at a retreat at the National Leadership Institute, Chankwanzi, from the 13th to 20th March 2019 resolves, and it's hereby resolved. Number one, to deeply appreciate and salute the leader of our revolution and our movement, as well as President of Uganda, General Yoweri K. Museveni, for his visionary, bold, courageous, steadfast, and consistent leadership of our people in their struggles against dictatorship and for democracy and freedom, spanning more than 50 years. Number two, to warmly and strongly recommend to the membership of the NRM, our national leadership organs, the continuation in leadership of both state and party up to 2021 and beyond of our beloved leader, General Yoweri K. Museveni. Number three, to warmly commend and salute the Central Executive Committee for leading the way during the Chwabe retreat for the resolution we are making and adopting today. Justification. We are at a most critical and delicate juncture in the process of transformation of our country. This cannot be the point to let go of our visionary and unifier. We need Musei now. We need Musei more now than ever before. We need his firm guidance as we execute a qualitative leap from backwardness to modernity. We need his firm guidance in this dawn of the digital, nuclear, and space age. We need his firm guidance in mentoring and growing the ideological, political, and technical cadreship for protecting the gains of our revolution, as well as securing the future of the Ugandan and African people. Dated 17th March 2019 at Chankwanzi.
For this and other jokes, I mean, it's appalling. It's absolutely appalling. Space age. And let me tell you, quite frankly, now it sounds like the Soviet Union, but
North Korea,
talking about Joseph Stalin. That's what it sounds like. You know, visionary, unifier, what? Okay, is he immortal? At some stage, he's not going to be around. So, does the country disintegrate because he's not around? I mean, the things that come out of that caucus. But anyway, they are wasting time and cutting deals and so on. Maybe the conversation should be away from what they are doing. And because I'll give you an example. One of the rebel MPs who was not invited, so actually a number of them raised issues talking about, because in that same caucus he says he's reduced poverty by 160% since 1986. That's the story we hear about 1986. Now let me give you a different version in 30 seconds. In 1986 we had a positive balance of trade generally of about $30 to $40 million, positive balance of trade. That means we exported more than we imported.
imported.
That went up to 1988. That's how long it took for our pseudo-communists to discover the pleasures of the good life. The only thing the only thing that's not communist about them is the way they eat money. That's capitalist. But their ideologies and everything is communist, as she said. But you know, that's when now, by 1989, we were in a negative of $30 million. By 1995, we were in a negative of $300 million. Now, by 2017, not even 2017, we're in a negative of 3.1 billion US dollars. So you see how far it has grown. And this is because we have an appetite that far supersedes, you know, the production, our ability to produce, and nobody is looking at that. Even when it comes out, it's in form of platitudes of let's stop dividing districts to give money to the youth, and that's because they are reacting to somebody who seems to be taking away the youth from them. Now, they are offering some things which, of course, are not going to be real. Now, you look at people who are totally communist, as she said, except when it comes to eating money. Now, they are more capitalist than the best of them.
30 seconds are gone. Let me come back to Barbara.
Charles, you know, it's it's difficult to find something positive to say about this resolution. It's extremely difficult right now to say to find something positive. If you say this is a critical, how do they call it? They tell me the critical points.
In a critical
I'll find it. I'll find it in a moment. I'll get back to it.
But what's critical at the moment? Is it critical because the economy is declining? It's critical because of the quality of life is declining in this country. It's critical because there is no public goods and services. It's critical because there's nothing for Ugandans to hold on to. I don't think it's critical because we're at a takeoff stage, as they're saying that in the next 3 years we're going to be a middle-income country. I don't think that's what they're looking at right now. They're looking at. I think it's critical because everything is falling apart. There is nothing absolutely to hold on to.
Honorable Muhanga, you want to come in there? I'm still trying to come to terms with the thinking, and especially whoever drafted this justification.
Actually, that person must have gotten a resolution from Russia.
His firm guidance in this dawn of the digital, nuclear, and space age. Seriously?
Space age in Uganda?
Space age. Nuclear, digital age. Seriously? Honorable Muhanga?
Everybody's entitled to their opinion. I think you become highly opinionated and you don't want to listen to other people's views. Because if you think you're wise, sometimes you can be proved otherwise. And nobody should question the NRM, or nobody should. We have no apology for us for bringing back President Museveni as our presidential candidate. Let everybody who has a better candidate bring him, and then we shall see what 2021 decides. Ugandans will be given an opportunity to decide. And most likely, they will decide on President Museveni. And I can tell you, 2021 is just close to our nose.
We hear you on that, but I think when Honorable Muhanga, I think where we'd have to disagree is to say we, as the NRM, you draw your votes from all of us. And I don't think that you would tell who votes for which organization. But as leaders of the party, you have a responsibility to answer some of these questions and involve the people who vote for you or who you rely on in the discussions you're having in a retreat in Chankwanzi. If you reduce this to only the 300 plus members of parliament retreating in Chankwanzi, I don't know what you're saying to the rest of the millions that you said vote for President Yoweri Museveni.
Charles,
yes.
Our discussion, our conversation does not end with the national member, the NRM parliamentary caucus. We have got next with over 800 delegates who will come and also make a decision. We shall have the national delegate conference who will make the final decision. These are more than 10,000 Ugandans and Ugandan leaders chosen by the NRM right from the village to the sub-county. These are the people who are going to make the final decision on who shall be their presidential candidate. And in the event that they choose President Museveni, we really have no apology. This is a person who has led the country very well, who is trusted, who is tested, and who is going to lead us forward. And so, nobody should say the NRM agreed. Now, the 10,000 members of the National Delegate Conference, is everybody going to live on Museveni for heaven's sake? People come from the villages here in Muvare, from they don't even get to meet him. But they come and endorse the same things that we have endorsed. So if anybody feels bad about it, really, we have a choice. All Ugandans, all the 17 million Ugandan voters, will be given a chance to choose a person. And so if they don't want him, they will show us that we are greedy. They didn't want him.
But yeah, what you're raising for us has been raised by other revolutionaries, if you want to put it that way. The leadership of the Green Party in Libya argued exactly the same, and their leader ended up in humiliation. If you look at the example of Algeria at the moment, it's because you people who have the means and the ability to save President Yoweri Museveni from what we have seen of Abdelaziz Bouteflika are urging him on, and what the members here are arguing is because you have selfish interests in his staying on in power, and you're not able to stand up and save him and the country together with him and say, you have served that for 50 years, now you can, you have groomed some other people within the party, and the party has capacity to survive beyond you. That doesn't come out of the retreat in Changwanzi. That the party, the NRM can survive beyond President Yoweri Museveni. Doesn't seem to come out. Yes? Hello?
Hello?
Yes.
You are pushing a personal opinion, and you will not impose it on anybody, Charles. That is your personal opinion. I have a different opinion.
Sure.
We all have different opinions. You can't say because the other leader ended like this and this one will end like this. Dynamics are different. Countries are different. The politics there was different. And so, if for us we give everybody an opportunity to speak, now if you're saying we are selfish and everyone wants something like Museveni, really, do you think a chairperson LC3 of Bubusoro, where you come from in my constituency, has access to the president or has access to the power and the privileges that you're talking about, that people with the privileges, with everything, are the one pushing for this agenda? Actually, the contrary, it is the people on the grassroots that love Museveni more than it. I can tell you that. In some villages here, in my constituency, you just can't go and tell any other person. And that's why I tell you, you people who keep thinking the Bobby Wine is really in this equation, you will get a shock of your life. Who knows you? Once you leave Kampala, who knows you and who cares? Nobody. Think about what's happening in sort of down there. And then you start saying that there is a person called so and so. I mean, they have actually a different perspective of him, those who get to know him.
Thank you.
And small trading centers.
Thank you.
It's not even in this equation at all. It's not even an issue that NRM will discuss here in Changwanzi at all.
Thank you very much, the Honourable Margaret Mohanga. The Honourable Margaret Mohanga, declaration of interest. She's my member of parliament. Thank you very much, but we need to bring this back in and close it off. So I'll give each one of you 30 seconds to give a closing remark.
Well, since the closing remark has got to be about this NRM thing, I'll tell you this. The theme, official theme for the thing was, for their retreat, was modernization, industrialization,
job creation,
and shared prosperity. That's what it was. Now, the truth is, all the figures that you see about Uganda and its 6% economic growth and what is prosperity among a very small and growing smaller nucleus of people. You don't need arguments when people are prospering. You don't need to give them statistics when people are prospering. They know it. And the people of this nation know that they're not prospering at all. Like the other man said, it's worse off than it was before. We've gotten there. I know for sure the money in people's pockets, even they have less money than they did before the NRM came to power. That's for sure. I know it. Because peasants, I went to school with them when I was in Amiriambo. People who were peasant farmers had enough money to pay school fees and bring their children there, and they were not living below par. They were actually having a good life. Selling all these things. So the truth is, there's got to be a counter-revolution.
Thank you.
After all these years of revolution. And Margaret Mwanga said they're offering no apologies. We are not expecting any from them. Certainly not from her. But we have also to give our opinion.
Thank you.
Right. Looking at this resolution, it is 3 days to the end of the retreat. I wonder, because President Museveni is camping there until, I think, Tuesday, if I'm right. I'm sure this was a gift to him before he leaves. I'm just wondering what the other resolutions would be by the end of the meeting.
Barbara?
Interestingly, though, just a very quick one as well. When you hear the kind of discussions that are going on there, when you look at the resolution and the kind of discussions that are going on there, I feel a bit cheated, and I wonder how resolutions are actually developed. The discussions were very, very, very energetic, very forward-looking. They were raising particular questions, very serious questions to the government, and I was hoping that a resolution would reflect that. From this, I don't think I've seen that. Probably in the next 3 days we will have.
I think it's simply because the reason for this retreat was to get the NRM MPs to toe the line. They're the majority members of NEC. Next will be calling district chairpersons, who then will toe the line, so that by the time they go for the national conference, it's assured that it's President Museveni, no one will challenge him, and he will still be the president. But the other thing also is that it's very sad that you had all these very brilliant presentation from people outside the party, but there is absolutely no discussion about the future of this country. No one is planning the future of this country. No one is thinking for this country. All that they're thinking about is the next election.
Because the man has the vision.
Exactly.
So why discuss it?
Well, President Museveni, our time is out, because I'll tell you, the presentations will go well, but the discussion, the mind of the members of parliament are not on the fundamental issues you're talking about. It's about politics. We think politics so much, we think less about other things. So we can't scrutinize them as effective as we need. Maybe just to end on a lighter note, the president yesterday talked about, in his opening remarks, he talked about Bobby Wine. He had commented about him. But the president advised Bobby Wine to continue in music and told him to go to Susanna Club. Now, I don't know how many of us have any relationship or remember Susanna Club, because Susanna Club ended a long time ago. I think I found that quite intriguing, because if President Museveni remembers Susanna Club, that also tells about the 50 years of the revolution. And of course, there was that clash between the police and Dr. Kizza Besigye and the supporters in Ginger. We'll have more detailed discussions about the configuration on the opposition side in subsequent discussions. I'd like to thank you very much, Joseph Kabuleta, for making time for the show. Thank you very much, Kasim Kayira. Thank you very much, Barbara Among. Thank you very much, David Himbara, and the Honorable Margaret Muhanga, for joining us on the show tonight. And all of you, viewers, I have a lot of messages that you sent through, but time doesn't allow me to read out your messages. I appreciate, and I can see an interesting discussion going on on Twitter. Please carry on the discussion on our social media platforms, on Twitter, on Facebook. You can actually watch the show on Facebook and on YouTube. From me, it's a good night.